My next guest is an intuitive movement facilitator who helps women become fully aligned with themselves and truly embody that. And during our conversation, we talk about what it means to fully align with yourself and different practices that anybody, not just women, men included as well, can use in order to live in full alignment and just live sort of the best life that you want to, full of happiness, and how to overcome trauma and overcome depression and overcome anxiety. And I think that everybody can learn a lot from this conversation. And we had a really, really fun time recording it as well. So here is Olga.
I did a trip to Europe right before starting university. And then after, I did like 5 months of teaching abroad in China. That was an interesting experience for sure. And then I came back, and then I also did like a session over the summertime in a different province, working at like a horse ranch. So that was interesting. And then like I would always just be moving around. I found it really hard to just stay and do the 4 years and like not have any other experiences whatsoever. I found that super, super boring. And so I just always was being pulled in all these directions. I traveled to Australia with my then boyfriend. It was like Australia, New Zealand, and Hawaii. And I freaking loved that. And yeah, just kept kind of going places, exploring. And I'm glad I did all that, because now that I have my kids, it's like the concept of travel is very daunting, although I still want to do it, but it's just so much heavier to even like fathom. So yeah, I'm glad I had that time.
Did you grow up traveling too, or was it only kind of once you went to university and were sort of free, quote unquote, that you kind of got the itch to start doing that?
Yeah, well, I definitely got the itch. I come from Europe, so I was born in Ukraine, and I moved to Canada with my family when I was 7. And since then, my parents always tried to like make us travel as much as possible, but it was always like an all-inclusive resort. So it was like a week in Mexico, or a week in Cuba, or a week in whatever. So it was never really, kind of an immersive experience. I wanted more than that. But yeah, my mom definitely tried to get us out on trips to like get those memories, and then we would come back home. But yeah, so I definitely got the itch. And in high school, I did a couple of trips to Europe, and I was like, as soon as I finished and I had my own job and I had a little bit of money, I was like, I want to take a trip. So me and my friend did a little trip to France and Spain. And yeah, ever since then, I kind of always loved it and always wanted to explore and just never stop exploring. And I still want to continue exploring. I actually feel like it's more important to travel when you have kids, because you want them to have this like rich appreciation of the world as they're growing up. But it's just like, I think I'm waiting for that time when I feel like, okay, it's not that daunting, because toddlers are just so insane that it's like you want to wait past toddlerhood to just like be able to like, okay, now they're able, I can have a conversation with them,
Yeah. I used to always get like, probably when I was in college, or like late high school, when people would bring their kids on planes, and, of course there's the kid crying on the plane, and you're, me at that age, I'm like, oh my God, it's so fucking annoying. Like, don't travel with your kids. As I've gotten older, not that I'm that much older, now I'm like, damn, that fucking sucks. Like, I know you probably more than everybody else on the plane do not want your child to be doing that.
Oh my God, I know. It's like the worst. You're just like, I'm sorry, but there's nothing I could do.
What was the reason that your parents immigrated to Canada from Ukraine originally?
Just for like better future, my dad was like opportunity and, more income, the dream, the kind of like, they say the American dream, but the Canadian dream, very similar, like, a better life for us to have opportunity, for us to be able to do whatever we wanted, to pursue the career we wanted. Like he really didn't feel like we had that there.
Yeah. Did they have, I guess, like a plan of like what they were going to do for work when they came to Canada immediately? Or like, did they have to, do the kind of entrepreneurial, gritty immigrant that you kind of hear?
Yeah, like my mom really had to hustle. She worked in jobs she definitely did not enjoy for a while there, because she hardly spoke English. So she had to learn over time. But my mom is such a hustler. Like she really figured it out. And a few years later, she started her own business and, became an entrepreneur and had her own salon doing, nails and facials and stuff like that. She's an esthetician. So yeah, she really is hardworking and hardcore. And eventually she found her way to having a successful business in her home. And my dad, he actually spoke English really well because he was already in Canada for, I think, like 2 years, and then he had come back to Ukraine to be with us, and then we immigrated together as a family. So his English was really good. His profession was already very transferable because it was in like, mechanics. He was a mechanic, so he was able to really transfer that really easily to Canada. And so that really helped, right? Because oftentimes there's a profession like being a doctor or a lawyer, and then you come to another country like Canada or the States, and you can't do that anymore. You have to relearn or totally pick something else. And so, yeah, we were lucky. My dad kind of knew what he was doing in that respect, and he knew what was transferable and what wasn't. So, yeah, so he got a job right away, and my mom kind of caught up over time.
Yeah. What was it like for you being that young, going to a completely new country without knowing everybody? And like, I don't know, like, did you feel kind of outcasted? Like, was it hard to fit in, initially, or were you still kind of young enough where, you were able to pick up on it pretty quick?
Yeah, I think I was so lucky. First of all, I don't know if I'm just adaptable as a personality, but we moved several times, even after we moved to Toronto. We moved to a different part of Toronto, and then we moved again and again. And I'm just really adaptable. I never really got so attached to the friends that I had, or maybe they weren't good enough friends that I don't know. I didn't care. I don't remember really pining for any particular place. I don't remember, regretting or being mad at my parents for moving like a lot of kids I hear do. But so I was really lucky. I picked up the English really quickly within like 6 months, and I kind of just adapted super quickly. It was my sister who was a lot older than me. She's 8 years older. So she was right at the high school age. So all those things you said, she felt that, like being the outcast, not speaking the language, like feeling so embarrassed about not speaking language and all those things, being bullied. She bore the brunt of the whole experience. I feel like I got away easy, but I do have a really traumatic memory of my dad leaving me for the first time in school, me not speaking the language and not even knowing how to ask where the bathroom is, right? I'm just like, Are you actually leaving me right now? Like, I was just like, this is not a thing. He's like, yeah, I got to go to work. And I'm like, what? So I do have that that's imprinted in my brain. But I think after that, I quickly kind of adapted and adjusted. And there was a couple, I spoke, even though we're from Ukraine, we speak Russian. And so there was a couple Russian speaking twins in my class. And so I think I just asked some questions.
Gotcha. So kind of getting into what you do now. So one of the things that you, I guess, talk about a lot is the idea of like intuitive movement.
Yep. Yeah.
Could you just explain to me, someone who has no idea what that is, what is that?
Yeah, to be honest, until recently, I didn't really know what that was either. And I had trouble putting words to it. And then this kind of series of words dropped in, and I was like, okay, this is what I'm going to call this for now. Because, so I've been kind of dancing ever since I fell out of the womb. I just remember there's pictures of me constantly dancing all the time, and dancing in a free spirited kind of way. And even though I've always enjoyed dance, I've never really, been trained in it. I was on the dance team in high school for 3 years in a row, but I was never professionally trained. I didn't take classes. I didn't do ballet, jazz, any of those things. The only thing I was kind of trained in was hip hop. But yeah, and eventually I kind of found a mentor that was guiding women through intuitive movement. And I was like, whoa, this is a thing. And so it was kind of like a journey, and it was just a way to move in whatever way your body wants to. It's kind of a mix of yoga and moving the way your body wants to move out of the frame of yoga. And so I was super intrigued, because this is what I was always doing anyway, on my free time. It's kind of like dancing in your living room, but a little bit more structured than that. And I just was intrigued, because after I had Dorian, I became, a yoga teacher trainer, and, I taught yoga in studios and also in my own home. And I loved yoga, but there was always something that was missing for me. And it was a little bit too structured, and I was the kind of person that if I heard a good song, I would want to move in a way that felt intuitive to me. And I didn't want to follow these structured kind of I want to say masculine shapes that yoga does. You know, like warrior one, warrior two. And so it's kind of a combination. What I teach now is a combination of two. So it's got some of the structure of yoga, but really it's unleashing and moving your body in a way that you're not really,
You're not
a
bound.
lot of people are not used to doing. I could say I'm used to doing that, but a lot of people aren't. And so it's like allowing your body to go in places where it's not used to going. And so just being free with your movement. And it's kind of hard to explain in words, but when you see it, you kind of understand.
Yeah. Do a lot of people, when they come to you for the first time, like, do they struggle with that kind of freedom of movement just because we're so used to these structural patterns that have been kind of like ingrained in us?
Absolutely. And, you know, to those people, I always say it's practice. Just like doing yoga for the first time is like, holy, what the hell is that? Any other practice that you try or start, even breath work, you know, it's something that you get better with over time, you get comfortable over time. But yeah, when you first start, you're kind of like, how do I do this thing? And how do I do it the way she does it? And I always say, it's not the point. The point is not for you to follow exactly the way that I'm doing it, the way it's kind of doing it in your own way, allowing yourself to set your body free. And it might feel weird just hearing that, like, okay, what the hell does that mean? Set your body free. But you start with the structure that I'm giving you, but then you see where you want to go deeper, where you want to go lower, where you want to go higher, where you want to stretch more. And so you kind of just explore and play. And so it's this concept of playing that we stop doing as adults, right? We do it as kids. We crawl around like a monkey. We're all these like primal animalistic things. Like we could be whatever we want to be in our imagination. And we manifest that in our bodies, and we show that in our bodies. But then as adults, we're like, well, that's weird, you know, like, ooh, I don't know if I want to pretend to be a cat. And so it's not like I'm teaching people to be different animals, but I'm kind of asking them to embody their primal nature, like really get down and deep into the primal self.
Yeah, get kind of dig back into those animal instincts that we all have, and at some points in our lives have been taken out of us for just kind of whatever reason. I think we just get so caught up in, again, just like societal structures and what we should be doing and what we think we should be doing, that we forget to have fun. Like the concept of literally just having fun. I was just having a conversation with one of my friends like an hour ago, and we were talking about the fact that so many people in life just every day, like they don't do something that's genuinely fun to them. They don't think like, what can I do right now that would be playful and fun and like silly without the fear of like being judged, because we're just so taught that that's something that we should do for whatever reason. And it's really hard to get out of that mindset. Like, did you have trouble with the concept of just kind of moving freely originally? Or I know that you've, you know, kind of been dancing for a while, but like that kind of deeper concept of just embodying like your authentic self, was that ever difficult?
Yeah. So every single time I do it, I find I can get deeper and more unleashed and more free and more like there's always layers that you can tap deeper into. It's like peeling an onion, right? Like you think you've got it, and then there's a deeper layer and the deeper layer that you learned. And so for me now, it's become a practice of whenever I feel like I need clarity in life or something, I'll just do a practice instead of thinking. I just go into my body. The part where I struggled the most wasn't moving in this way, because that's natural to me, where I know that's not natural to a lot of people. It's natural to me. What was hard was doing it visibly. So actually running my first course and like my first free thing, or like my first paid event, like that was crazy. Yeah, for sure. Like I felt like I was coming out of the closet or something as this, you know, and there was a lot of judgments in my own mind, like prejudging, like, okay, I don't want this to be, I'm doing this for other women. I'm not doing this for, you know, random online men to be staring at me. Like,
fucking
I
weirdos.
really want this to be something that women are ignited by. And they're like, yes, I can use my body to move through life and move through hardship and move through times that are difficult, challenging, and times when I lack clarity. And I'm just like, where the fuck do I go next in life? What do I do next? Like, I feel so stuck. You know, it's a way to allow your body to move you out of the stuckness in a way that your mind never could, because our body has its own innate intelligence that our mind cannot necessarily tap into unless we're doing some of these movements, and then all of a sudden everything just makes sense, and then some crazy epiphany will drop in. And in a way, I feel like this really makes sense with what you teach, and with like any hallucinogenics is it's very similar. You kind of get into this trance. If you really go dive into it deeply, it does become a kind of trance, and then you're clearing your body of like debris, of like spiritual debris, and stuff just gets to drop in for you. But yeah, coming out and doing it for the first time in front of people was definitely pretty terrifying. Yeah.
Yeah, I could I could certainly imagine. So you also went through like a pretty challenging postpartum, right?
Mm-hmm.
Was that the first time that you, I guess, kind of experienced like a depression like that? Was it depression that you were going through, or was it simply just like nothing? Like you just didn't have direction at that point?
Yeah, no, it was mostly anxiety. Okay. Yeah. So right before I got pregnant with my twins, I had, for the first time, I experienced what anxiety was. Mm-hmm. I've heard the term before, but I felt stress in my life, but I never felt anxiety. And at that point I was like, okay, this is what people mean when they say that. It's like this feeling like you're late for something, something's about to go badly wrong, but you have no proof that might happen. It's just in your body. You're like vibrating, and it's this weird thing. And before that, I never knew what anxiety was. I had no freaking clue. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, what the hell do I do with this? And so 2 days after I felt this, I realized I was pregnant, and at that point my hormones kind of shifted, and I asked my naturopath for an adaptogenic blend, and that was suitable for pregnancy, and she gave me that. And so I managed it. And to be honest, the anxiety went away because I think my hormones shifted. Mm-hmm. Then I had my twins, and that pregnancy was absolutely insane. It was really high risk. One of my twins had a congenital heart defect during pregnancy. I found out during pregnancy. And so I really had to move through that pregnancy in a very intentional way. So I was very, very focused on calming my thoughts, making sure that I wasn't frantic and terrified the whole pregnancy, that I was actually just moving through this and trying to actually enjoy. Not
passing on that frightenedness to the baby that's not even born yet.
Exactly. And so I was really, really intentional. But then when the twins came and everything got resolved, my baby had her heart procedure. She did really well. All of that initial stress was kind of like, I could take a deep exhale and be like, okay, she's fine. Thank God. Like, that's the thing I was worried about the most. And then I had the twins at home. And then, I had the help of my mother for the first few weeks, and then I was home alone with the twins, and my partner, of course, was helping a lot, but he mostly took care of my 4-year-old at the time. Mm-hmm. And so the anxiety definitely just like came back full force. I was just kind of slapped on the face with it. And I was like, okay, how the hell am I going to manage this? Like, what the hell am I going to do? And so that's kind of where psilocybin kind of saved my life a little bit, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you start microdosing with intention, or did you take like a full macro dose and that just shifted your perspective? Like, how did you even, I guess, discover psilocybin at that point?
Yeah. So, I've known about, psilocybin for a long time. The first time I took it, I think it was in Thailand. They have these mushroom shakes and whatever, and like they have the full moon parties, but that wasn't an intentional way, right? So although in general, I'm a very intentional person, I feel like I did not need a macro dose of anything because I was already awake to a point. You know what I mean? Like my whole life, my teenagehood, I was almost too awake for the world. Like I never got along with anyone because I was like, I don't get it. This is
like you can see past the veil.
Yeah, past the veil. Couldn't do small talk. I never fit in many ways. And so I didn't really, I felt like I didn't really need that macro dose awakening, right?
Yeah.
But, I did kind of play with psilocybin before. I remember having a dried baggie of mushrooms and taking like one. And this was before I had my twins, and, just kind of like, oh, well, that's what that feels like. And so that's when the relationship started. I started cultivating the relationship, right, with this, with psilocybin. And then so I remember doing that, and I was like, okay, this is kind of making me see things a little bit colorful. That's interesting. And then I met this really amazing woman that was growing her own. So she grew her own, and she was an amazing apothecary. She had a lot of plant medicines, and she had this beautiful cannabis salve that I bought from her for my partner's grandmother's arthritis pain, and it totally helped and totally went away. And then I found out she was having, she had microdosing capsules, right? She told me about it, and she was and I looked into it, and I was like, okay, what is this? What's it for? And so that's where my relationship started. I started cultivating that relationship with psilocybin. And this is how I like to talk about all plants and fungi. Like, it's a relationship. It's like a friendship, right? You kind of have these experiences together, and you see if you're a match or you're not a match, right? Yeah. And so I took one, and 3 days later I took another one, and 3 days later I took another one. And I was like, this is really helping me manage my postpartum experience, especially when I have very little sleep.
Yeah.
And so your ability to manage those chaotic moments as a new mom, especially when you're, like there's one baby screaming, another baby screaming, you're like pumping or nursing all the time, and there's like just constant chaos. Like you have to be a superhuman at regulating your nervous system. And sometimes that is just not possible when you have 0 sleep or 3 hours of sleep or 4 hours of sleep. So that's when it was the most useful to me. Like when I had no other tools at my disposal, I didn't have the chance to nourish myself adequately. I didn't have the chance to sleep adequately. And this is me with this. I was a person with a lot of support. Like my mom would cook food for me. She would help me babysit sometimes. And I had my partner around, and still I was feeling this. So if you just imagine, this is why I wanted to talk about this more publicly, is because a lot of women are by themselves in this situation, and their partner goes off to work, and there's no one helping them. And so I just want women to know, this was my experience. I'm not saying it's going to be yours, but it really helped regulate my anxiety. And it helped me focus. It helped me see the light of my life. It literally helped me see my children as these most beautiful creatures, where sometimes you just get daunted, right? You're just like, oh my God, when will this day be over? It helped me just transform my day to be like, oh my God, this is amazing.
Yeah.
So, and I just feel like I'm so hypersensitive that the concept of microdosing felt very safe and very accessible to me. I'm a very sensitive person. That's why I feel like I don't even need a macrodose. I feel like just from a microdose, I can have incredible benefits, and it can alter my life in so many ways that I don't really think I need. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Has it been an ongoing relationship for you since you first started?
Yeah. So that's another interesting thing. So I find that, I was able to, those acute symptoms of anxiety and oh my God, I'm going to have a panic attack, were managed amazingly with psilocybin. However, I'm a huge believer that using plant remedies and fungi, sometimes it can be similar to using pharma in a way that it only covers this. You're only managing symptoms. You're not actually.
It's not getting to the root cause.
Yeah, you're not going into the root cause. So eventually, through all of the learning that I did and through doing a program on postpartum nutrition, I was able to completely replenish my nutritional stores that I was so depleted in, right? Because you spend 9 months growing 2 humans. Then you spend, I spent a year pumping and nursing my twins. I spent 3 years nursing my son before that. So it was pretty depleted, right?
Yeah.
So I replenished my nutrition stores. And so now I do not need psilocybin in order to feel okay and not anxious, but I'll just experience it when I want to, right? So sometimes when I want to have a super focused day, or I just feel like it, then I will, engage in that relationship again. But I find it's totally different now. So I feel like I kind of feel like psilocybin has been slowly our relationship is kind of not super necessary right now. We can come and go as we please together, but we don't really need to continue this relationship. So I do find that that's what's interesting about plants and fungi, is that they can be there for a time, and then we don't really need them, and they're like, off you go, you're free, I've done my part. And I just think that that's so beautiful, and I find that with other plants and other fungi as well for me.
What other plants and fungi do you regularly try to, I guess, have a relationship with as well.
Yeah. So the others aren't like psychedelic so much. They're just, they're just kind of, yeah.
Most aren't.
Yeah. So yeah, like things like cordyceps and chaga, I'll drink in tincture form all the time. I have an incredible herbalist that's local that I get a lot of these tinctures from, who again, like they have an incredible relationship with these plants, and they've taught me too as well. Like I've taken lots of programs with them.
Yeah.
And so things like St. John's wort, I used to take a lot more regularly during seasonal affective disorder. During the winter time when you're going into your dark night of the soul, sometimes you need a boost of happiness. And so, yeah, St. John's wort would help me a lot. Right now, it's more, motherwort. Motherwort is like a major, major mama's herb. It's just something that reminds you that, okay, here, you could just go for a walk outside, take your motherwort, and you're going to like feel better. I don't know. It just tells you what you've forgotten that you need to feel better. So motherwort is a good one. And then two that I've always taken throughout pregnancy and postpartum are nettle infusions and red raspberry leaf infusions all the time. So just like really deep, rich infusions that also replenish my nutrient stores, that micro elements and little doses of calcium, iron, all that stuff.
Do you still kind of have the same intention setting with taking these ones that you do whenever you microdose as well? Or is this more like you can kind of just wake up and just take all these and then go about your day? Or is it still important to have those intentions and understand what they do for you and why you're taking it?
That's such a good question. I honestly think it's always important to have an intention with every single thing you do in life. But yeah, especially when you're having these relationships with these plants, I definitely think, I feel like the nettle and the red raspberry have become such a regular part of my life, like such a sort of a ritual that I'm less intentional about it. I'm like, okay, this is just something I do. Like, it's just, it is intentional, but it's just such a part of my life that we're like one.
Yeah.
So just have a massive bag in my pantry, like literally this big of like 2 pounds of each. And so, yeah, that's more like just a part of my everyday life routine, I guess. But yeah, the tincture is definitely, because they're quite strong. And so I'm always, whenever I'm taking them, and sometimes I'll mix a couple together, I'll definitely like be connected with them.
Yeah,
for sure.
Talking again, kind of about like the chaos of motherhood, like right when you started at that point, like, were you able to figure out kind of where that anxiety was coming from?
Yeah,
like
I truly believe
kind of what the root cause was.
Yeah, no, I truly believe the root cause of a lot of depression and anxiety in postpartum mothers comes. I can't speak to everybody else, but for postpartum mothers is like what I kind of specialize in and what I did a training in and nutritional training in, and so I truly believe it's from depletion. Huge depletion, right? Like I said, we grow a human for 9 months. For me, it was 2 humans. And then on top of that, we breastfeed right after. So we're constantly giving. And so, one of the biggest causes of depression is low iron levels, which is like, and we bleed. And so like I had a massive blood loss with my twins, like immediately postpartum. I had massive blood loss, even though I had a pretty, I don't want to say uneventful because it wasn't uneventful, but I had, a vaginal birth with my twins, which is pretty kind of, I guess, uncommon, but I did have a massive hemorrhage after. And so my iron stores were super low. So I really had to be intentional about how am I going to replenish this as quickly as possible. And so, yeah, like a lot of that anxiety is like a lot of, depletion.
So like,
it's heavy depletion.
So there's a lot of obviously like physiological depletion. From a psychological standpoint, like do you get the depletion almost from your sense of self as well? Because you're giving so much to these children now that you're raising, that did it also feel like you were kind of losing who you were at this point too?
So it's interesting you bring that up. So after my first son, he's my only son, but my first child, I definitely had, that's where I had all of that happen to me. So the loss of self, the loss of purpose, the loss of who the hell am I? is this really what I want to do in life? Like, I was definitely not going to go back to my government job, which I was pretty happy at in the moment. I was like, you know, this is getting me enough money that I can travel and do this and have whatever I want. Like, what do I really have to spend money on? You know, it was really just an easygoing thing for me. And then after, I was like, definitely not going back to that. I definitely want to be with my son for as long as I can. I nursed him for 3 years and he was, you know, at home with me. But with that came a massive loss of self, a massive kind of reinvention of self, a massive like, yeah, what the hell is my purpose? I don't really know where to start digging into that because I thought it was going to be this whole time. And now I don't really think it's that because I don't know, your children just have a way of showing you like all the bullshit that you were feeding yourself. They're just like, oh, actually that shit you thought was important actually isn't. And so you start to like dig deep into like, what is important to me and what should I put my focus and attention on? And like the relationship between me and my husband, like we only knew each other for like probably 8 months before we got pregnant. Right. And so dealing with that and how wild that was and like getting to know each other and being like, whoa, you're not the person I thought you were. And like, that was so heavy. That was probably that was one of the hardest things. And figuring out who I was again was super, super challenging. Finding my community again. So when I had my first son, I had no other mothers. I had no connection with any other mothers. I was the first of any of my friends to have kids.
How old were you at the time?
Yeah, I was 26.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was really like, I need to find my people. And so I did a doula training where I wanted to learn how to become a birth doula, and then a postpartum doula as well. And I found a lot of my people in that community, which was beautiful. And so, yeah, I connected with a lot of moms, which really helped a lot. That helped from the community standpoint, but I still didn't really help in terms of like, do I know what I want to do in life? I started teaching yoga and all this stuff was great, but it wasn't very financially sustainable.
Yeah.
And so with my twins, it was a very different experience for me. I actually emerged from that pregnancy because that pregnancy was so hard and the situation with my daughter having her surgery was so hard that after that, I was literally like kind of on fire. I had this renewed sense of passion for life. And I just realized I could do anything because what I went through was so hard. That was kind of my rock bottom. Like hearing that news that my daughter might not survive the pregnancy, that was kind of like what people say is their rock bottom. I was so in shock, so traumatized. So like, why is this happening to me? Like, is there something that I did wrong? Is it something that I did wrong nutritionally? Like, I don't fucking know. And so from then I just kept climbing and climbing and climbing and just reassuring myself and seeing a healed outcome. And I saw, healers and people that helped support me. And I got so strong from that whole experience that it kind of shot me into this place where I was like, okay, I have twins, but I still want to start my own business. I don't really, I know this is insane to be wanting to do this when they're like a couple months old, but I'm still doing it. And so I actually started showing up online probably when they were about 4 months old or something like that. And then by 6 months old, I went back to a full-time job for about 6 months just because I wanted to start making money. And yeah, I just wanted to kind of like propel myself into this limitlessness. I felt limitless because I really felt like what I overcame was insanely huge. And I was so grateful for her life and to be able to have these beautiful beings. And I very much used the support that I had, which my parents are so supportive and they really helped me. Like they're like my number one babysitters. So they helped me through and they're like, if you want to get going and like start doing things for your career as well, we'll help you. And so I definitely took them up on that and I still am. And I just kind of propelled myself through, but I didn't quite discover what it is that I was going to teach in the world until just recently. Like the intuitive movement thing is pretty recent. I was like, that's what I meant to do. And it just all clicked through doing the practice.
They're just basically going through all of these different things that felt right at the time, but it, wasn't quite clicking until you finally just figured out like, I'm assuming you probably just had like that, oh shit moment. you're like, oh shit, this is it. Like, this is what I want to fucking do.
Yeah. And it was like, it was also, I don't know if you had something similar. I would love to hear your story, but I like this whole piece where you're like, why didn't I see that like 2 years ago? Like, I can't, like, this is so obvious. Like, why didn't I realize that this is what I'm meant to be doing? Like, so I'm
like
curious.
you see, like once that happens, you see all of these patterns that have happened in the past that could have led you to the same exact conclusion at some point, but there was something subconsciously blocking you at that moment that you just weren't able to see it. Because honestly, like I'm a huge believer in just like the divinity of the universe. Like, it wasn't your time. If you weren't ready at that time to learn that lesson, because you still needed to go through things. And one of the things that you just talked about of sort of like hitting your rock bottom, I almost kind of hate saying this, but I think everybody kind of has to hit their version of rock bottom before those patterns really begin to reveal themselves. And we spend so much time trying to not hit it because it's not fun. When you're at rock bottom, I can't say that that's like, you know, a great place to be, but it does light that fire under you. I mean, I'm curious if you believe that people also have to hit their version of that in order for them to really authentically, like propel up.
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's multiple thoughts on this. And I don't know if I have like a decisive yes or no really answer, but I do see it a lot. I do see people that are the most successful tend to have that, and successful is relative, but like if they believe they're
whatever they deem
right?
success.
Yeah, like whatever, if they believe that they're successful, right? They often relate it to something that happened and that really made them see the truth, like to see the truth in themselves. And like you said, that divinity, that we are divine, and that we can truly have, manifest, create whatever we desire. Not just that, but like there's just so much potential within us that we're not seeing it. We're just not, we're so blind and we forget. And so this forgetting is kind of a constant. We remember and then we forget, and something happens, we remember and then we forget, in this constant cycle. And so it's like cultivating these routines that allow you to keep remembering. And so I don't necessarily think you have to hit your rock bottom, but it's certainly helped me. Like I don't even recognize myself that, like, compared to how I was before, just in terms of the motivation that I have for life. Like when I get up in the morning, I want to go work on my stuff. I want to go work on my business. When I get up in the morning, I'm like on fire. Like I've never ever felt like that before. And I've always wanted to, and I didn't know what it was that was going to make me feel like that. And so it truly did launch me off. And again, it's one of those things that when you look back in your life and that worst experience you've had, that rock bottom, you wouldn't change it for the world, because if that didn't happen, you wouldn't be here, right? And so it always is this beautiful thing that you're like, I'm so glad that happened to me, and I'm so glad my daughter decided to come in through me in the way that she did, because if she hadn't, you know, I wouldn't have realized this potential of myself and this fire within. I don't know. She created that for me. So yeah, you're right. It's very common, for sure.
Yeah. I think our souls are always drawing us towards whatever that thing is that's going to, you know, ignite that fire inside of us throughout our entire life. And then it's up to us to be conscious and aware enough to try to see it. I don't think if you ever go through life and you're, you know, just kind of, as we talked about, like on that autopilot mode where you're just doing things and not understanding why you're doing things and you're not aware of it, cultivating that sense of awareness is what will help you break the patterns that are going to continue over and over again before you find out what it is that, you know, you truly align with and what lights your soul on fire. And creating that conscious awareness is just so important. And it does not look the same for everybody. It looks completely different for every single person. And what you talked about when you asked is like, you know, can I look back and also see those same patterns in me? Yeah, 100%. I've been experimenting with plant medicine for, let's call it like 4 or 5-ish years now, and not really understanding why I was so drawn to it and just kept getting drawn back. but it just was opening my mind a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And then I finally started actually going to therapy, and I started doing a lot of research online as to, you know, why it works the way it does and the way my mind works and just consciousness in general. And then it wasn't until when I just came back from my ayahuasca retreat that everything really clicked. And what clicked was like what I was trying to see and what I was shielding myself from at the same time was coming like face to face with like my shadow and really seeing that part of myself that I have just been hiding from and so far away from for so fucking long. And that concept right there is what to me felt like sort of like my rock bottom, was realizing like everything that I was doing in life was not aligned with what it was that I actually wanted to be doing. Like all of the decisions that I had been making was in order to hide from the shadow and in order to get as far away from it as possible and not embrace that part of myself.
Wow. That's huge.
Yeah, it was definitely new. We'll say that. And still something that's also like constantly changing and you're still constantly learning. Like you're never done.
Of course.
You're never done healing. You're never done learning. You're never done figuring out what it is that excites you. And the things that excite you too are supposed to change over time. What I am absolutely passionate about and love today, in 20 years from now, it might not be the same things. And that's also okay. I think people sometimes also find those things that they're really passionate about, and then they put themselves in a box again, and they're like, okay, this is now my new identity. I now have to do this. And they have trouble getting out of that pattern again because they don't have that openness.
That's such a good point. Yeah. And something that's really led me to accepting that is one of my mentors said something about like your business, for example. Let's take what you're doing now or your podcast. It's this living organism, right? It's not a static thing. It doesn't have the same, like it's going to alter, it's going to shift, it's going to change, just like we change and shift and change. And so allow it to, and like see where it guides you, see where it leads you. If you're moving with intention and your intuition and your gut, it's going to lead you to where you need to be, right?
Yeah. That almost kind of brings me back to the sense of intuitive movement and how doing that can help you then intuitively move through your life.
Yes, exactly. And it's just like anything else. And it's like any other practice that roots you back into yourself.
Yeah.
And reminds you like, this is why I'm here. This is why I'm here. This is why I'm here. And the more you do it, the more you can remember what you're here for.
Yeah. So right now, what's the thing that I guess motivates you every day? Like when you wake up and you're like, yes, this is what I want to do.
Yeah. So I have a lot, they say like, follow your why. And so I definitely desire that location-free life. I want to be able to bring my kids wherever I want. I want them to see the world. I want them to travel. And so I want to be able to bring in money and liberate my spouse to be able to do whatever it is that he wants to do, because he has felt the pressure of, holy fuck, like I have to be the financial, provider for all of these kids, like ever since Dorian was born. And like, that's a huge burden. And I know it's also an honor, but I want to be equal in that. And I want to help support him. And and that's like one of the whys that really guides me. But also like, I want to help liberate women. I want them to feel free in their bodies. I want them to feel free in their lives. And so really the underlying word here is liberation and freedom. So I just want women to realize that they can do whatever the hell they want, even if it seems impossible because they've got 4 kids and they're breastfeeding one of them and life seems like a shit show. It's like, if you break down those steps to the smallest possible steps, tiny, tiny ones, you can move towards whatever it is that you desire to do in your life. You can have the life you want. It's just a matter of, you start with grounding and anchoring yourself in and nourishing yourself, and then to thrive, right? Like that's kind of the pyramid that I guide people through.
Do you think that idea of freedom for women specifically is, I guess a little bit more difficult than it is for men, because I think, like, I mean, me specifically, like, freedom is a huge part of my life, and I realize that like I need to live my life as a free person, and I need to be able to have that freedom.
Yes.
Do you think women get caught up in that more so than men do, because they're not necessarily, I guess, taught that at a young age, and they're taught that they kind of need to be these caregivers and need to do that?
Absolutely. And the thing is, you can be the caregiver and you can still be free and liberated, but finding that is really hard when you feel that burden, that you feel like your kids are a burden. So one thing that I've really worked on is to stop blaming my kids for all the things I can't do, because that's also a tricky thing, right? Then your kids grow up with them thinking that, like, they're the reason you can't live your life. And so I find the biggest thing that we can do as parents is actually to follow our passion. The biggest thing we could do as moms is to follow our passion, because otherwise you're just teaching your kids to be a martyr. So they're going to grow up, if you're raising a girl, she's going to think that she needs to martyr herself, sacrifice herself in order for her kids to live great lives. It's like, okay, there's going to be some degree of sacrifice, obviously, as parents, right? Is. We're not just going to keep doing all the things we've always done, right? Like, of course, we're going to sacrifice some things, some habits, some hobbies. But I really urge women, the second that they're out of that, like, real survival mode, that's in the first few months to years postpartum, you're like truly in survival, because you're literally like somebody's, relying on your body for survival. So that's like kind of a hard time, because you're kind of glued to the couch and you're nursing 24/7. It's intense, right? And so once you're just out of that survival mode, I really urge women to start coming back to the things that make them feel creative, make them feel inspired, make them feel alive. Some of those things they used to do before kids that they just forget, because they're like, we don't have time. I don't have time for this anymore, right?
Yeah.
We just tend to forget, and then we focus on the to-do list. We focus on how to be the best mom ever. Like, you're still going to always focus on that. You're still going to want to be the best parent ever. But, like, can you start doing some of those things that help you feel liberated, help you feel creative, help you feel free, help you feel tapped in to that bigger energy, the source, right?
Yeah.
So I don't even remember your question anymore.
I have no idea what it was. I wanted to ask you from that, I guess, like, what do you say to the women that, when you say, tap into those things before you were a mother, but that honestly never really felt that liberation to begin with, that were just always so fucking caught up in the minutia of life that they didn't even do that. Like, they have to go even a layer deeper of going all the way back to the beginning. And now they have kids on top of that.
Yeah, that's really hard. That's a great question. Honestly, it always goes back to the same thing for me. You got to start with practices that anchor you in. Like, do you have some sort of ritual? That's the thing that brings, like, anchors you, grounds you. Like, what do you do every day that is like, brings you back to yourself, coming back to yourself, And for some women, it's crazy, because if they haven't taken the time to explore themselves deeply before kids, and now they have kids and they have to do that, it's like, it feels even more burdensome. Yeah. It feels even harder to get through that veil, and to actually remember that, like, you are the answer. Like, stop giving your power away. This is the number one thing that I teach, is like, you don't need to give your power away to anyone else. You're the answer for everything, whether it be, this is like, maybe controversial, I don't know, whether it be like a medical thing, whether it be like your own health, like, you can heal yourself, you can heal your life, you can find the answers to what your purpose is. Like, all of that is from within, right? And these plant medicines can help us dive deeply into that. And that's a really good thing that you brought that up, because honestly, that's where I think macro dosing on psychedelics collapses time around spiritual awakening, right? If you want to collapse time around that, and you feel like it's really hard, and you just want this massive fucking wake up call, then that's what if you want that, if you truly desire that, and that is your intention,
if you're ready for that,
then plant medicines are a great way to collapse time, around that. So do I recommend this to others? I don't know. I have never done it myself. But for me, it would be like those little rituals that anchor you in, make time for those. And sometimes it's really hard, because we're like, how? It's like, well, when your kids are napping, when your babies are napping, or when they're in school, or when you can get your husband to take them outside for 15 minutes, you like come back to self. You ask yourself these really simple yes or no questions. Like, is this resonating? Is this in alignment with my life? Is this in alignment with my life? You know, should I take this supplement or this one? Like literally your body will answer for you, but you won't, you gotta learn how to listen, right? It's like learning how to listen.
Even
you
like before that,
the answer.
Yeah. Like even before getting that far of being like, does this make me do this? It's before that understanding just how do I feel in this moment? Like after you do anything, asking yourself, how do I feel right now? And understanding your emotions there. And then once you understand that, then you could start going, being like, okay, if I do more of this, this is going to make me feel better. If I do less of this, I'm going to feel better. And so if you don't have that understanding to begin with of, listening to your body and listening to your emotions and not judging them, just letting them come up and just understanding them. That's the first part that anybody, women and men, need to do a better job of. And men specifically are not fucking taught that at all. Nobody ever told me to listen to my emotions while I was growing up. I was always told that I should honestly like hide most of my emotions and, except for anger when I'm playing sports and shit like that. But anybody can have that grounding presence of just understanding what makes you feel certain ways.
Totally. And like coming back to that question that I now remember, like, is it harder for women or men? Like, honestly, there's hard things for both. Like it's like you said, you were dealt a shitty hand because that generation was like, no, suck up your feelings. You don't get to be emotional, if you're a man, and everything that's wrong with the world is all because of you, kind of thing. Like that sucks. And then for women, we have to deal with all the burdens of being everything at once, like we have to make money and we need to raise these perfect children and we need to do this and this and this. And like, how the hell do you carry all that? And all of that is just, it's massive societal baggage. And so I think we just need to realize that it's our choice to carry it or not.
Yeah.
So what are you going to do with that choice, right?
Yeah, 100%. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And thanks again to Olga for having such an amazing conversation. If anybody is interested in getting in contact with her, I'm going to link in the footnotes of this podcast to her Facebook group. And then I'll also link to her YouTube channel as well as her Instagram as well. So please reach out to her. And I will see everybody next week.